people were like, oh, I want to spread the gospel. Like, look at these and like, look at how cool they are and the different traits and whatever. And it wasn't about, hey, buy this so you can make a lot of money. You know, in late 2020, early 21, I was like, if I'm bullish on Ethereum, right? NFTs are, well, let's say I'm bullish on crypto, right? I'm bullish on Bitcoin, means if I go further out the risk curve, I'm bullish on Ethereum for that extra beta. And I go further out the risk curve and I'm bullish on NFTs because that upside reflexivity. I said I can make $100,000 bet and I could make 1,000x returns on that if I'm right. And if I'm wrong, I only lose 100%, right? I only lose what I put in.
Yeah.
And so when I first approached the space, I was going around and I was, sweeping floors. And, this is back when like $5,000 was like I would literally like sweep the floor and I'd be like, what else are you guys looking at? And people are like, whoa, 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 like don't put all your eggs in one basket, like spread it out and this and that. And I ended up minting a bunch of Chromie Squiggles, and Snowfro was like, what are you doing, man? Stop wasting your money. Make sure you like buy a CryptoPunk. And over the next couple of days, him and a couple other CryptoPunks really red pilled me on, I'm buying them. I'm like, okay, I get this. It's the OG. It didn't feel shilly at all. Like people wanted me to buy one, not because they wanted to dump on me, but because they wanted to expand the community and help people understand it. And it wasn't about making money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that like really stuck with me. And I was just like, oh, this is really, really cool. And I remember when I ended up buying, my first buy was a zombie. And then I ended up buying the ape. And I remember being like, okay, like I'm going to sell. My goal was to meme the ape as much as I could, because I was like, I'm going to sell the first CryptoPunk at Christie's or Sotheby's in 5 years. Right. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe I make like, I don't know, a couple $1,000,000 off this. And, turns out, I was off by about like 90%, right? 5 months later, CryptoPunks go up for auction at Christie's. The market really started flying. And I thought it was something that was going to take a year or two for me to like validate the trade. The trade was validated within like 10 days, a week. Like, cause I remember when I put my thread out, I think it was like January 6th or 8th. And that was like a local top in Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin topped at either 22,000 or 32,000 and then immediately pulled back like, I don't know, 10, 15%. And I was like, fuck. I was like, I bought the top, right? And then, like this is the, top behavior. And I think Kobe might have said this is what a top looks like or something like that when I bought my CryptoPunk. But yeah, it turns out, like the market matured much faster, right? Like we had a huge bull market run in 2021. And yeah, it was really interesting, fun times, like a lot of speculation, right? I think the really interesting thing that came out of the NFT boom is crypto understanding that culture matters. Because I think up until that point, I think a lot of people wrote off culture and how important that is for spreading the gospel that is crypto, right?
Yeah, but when punk started, what do you think was the culture? The culture, because who was there beside you, Snowfall? I guess it was the future of art. Like how did people look at it at that time?
So I wasn't there at the beginning, right? I was, CryptoPunks, I think started minting in like, 2017, right? I got involved in 2020. I was there, I'd say
Still very early.
Still early, relatively speaking, but like I wasn't there. Like I think the thing that made CryptoPunks special was that, yeah, people were trading them and speculating on them, but it wasn't about like, how do I make number go up so I can dump on you?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It wasn't.
It was a PvE. It wasn't like a PvP.
Yeah, it was like people were like, oh, I want to spread the gospel. Like, look at these and like, look at how cool they are and the different traits and whatever. And it wasn't about, hey, buy this so you can make a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's personally, and I know a lot of people have a lot of differing opinions on this. Like, I think there's some people that are like, we're moving towards a world where everything's going to be financialized. And then I'm not in that aspect, because I don't think that that leads to healthy outcomes and like a healthy life, right? And then at the other end of, okay, there is gamification and like doing things that you like that don't necessarily lead to you making more money, right? Because I think if you were to ask somebody on the street, hey, do you want to make more money? Everybody will say yes, right? Like everybody's like, of course I would love to make more money. But if you're like, oh, you need to do this and this and this to make more money, like not everybody will do that, right? And people do things because it makes them feel good, right? Like I'll take clothing as a great example because that's the space that I'm operating in. Is we all walk around with our favorite brands that we pay them to wear their logo, to be like walking billboards for them. We do that without financial gain. We do that for the prestige of it, for how it makes us feel, for all these different things. But yet, I know like there's people, and I think farming is the perfect example of this, is like, if I paid you, that we made this hat, right? An American trillionaire hat, very punny. If I said, Yoni, every time you wear this hat, I'm going to give you $2, right? At some point, I can't keep doing that forever, right? Like with a token drop or whatever.
And I will not be excited wearing the hat for all of
Yeah,
that.
because you would or you would not.
I wouldn't.
Right, because you're like, I'm getting paid to do this. It becomes a job, right?
Yeah,
And the second that I pay you a little bit less, you're like, well, I'm not gonna wear it, right? Like, oh, you're paying me $1.50 now. All right, I'm gonna wear a different hat. I like that hat more anyway. And I think that that's like one of the things is like there's something, I think on the consumer side, it's like when you build that culture, one, you need to have that product market fit of building something, making something that somebody is willing to give you money for it, and not just be like, oh, I'm only using this because you're giving me like some sort of financial return. And that's really hard because I think like the cheat code is like drop a token, give it to people so that we can manufacture activity so we can get a higher valuation. And then at some point you're hoping that flywheel sticks and like you grow something massive. And I just think that like it could work in the short term. It does work in the short term. We know that. But like how sustainable is that in the long term when you're talking about how do you get beyond 100,000 people, 500,000 people and get to 1 billion, right? And that's the hard part. And I think that's where like creating experiences, creating culture that people want to be a part of, that you don't have to pay them to be a part of it. That's like the secret sauce that I think crypto we haven't figured it out yet.
Not many people. I mean, some people figure it out. Like, who do you think in crypto figure it out?
Well, Pudgy, right?
Pudgy,
like I'd say Pudgy's like number one. I haven't spent that much time like looking around the room because I've been so heads down building like on what I'm doing. I guess I would turn that question around and ask you who you think has done a great job. I think Pudgy's done probably the best job out of anybody at this point.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like in the NFT world, I think Milady also have a great culture, very deep, like principled. Azuki, I'm starting to dive into them, and seems like they also have some depth. Then they went from the bottom, already 2x from the bottom. So it feels like they are going to be big because everyone that is recovering from near-death experience as a community, able to survive. And then the big coins, like I also think that that coins like Ethereum Classic and Bitcoin Cash have a strong, although not growing community, but strong community that have very strong principles. In their case, like cyberpunk principles. So
yeah, but like I think most of the communities that you mentioned, right? And this is like it's a very thin line, right? Because like all of them have strong communities because
of the asset.
Yeah, because they're like, we want number to go up, right? Because we all saw it with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is like the number one culture coin where I'm preaching the gospel of Bitcoin. And the more I preach it and the more people I onboard, it sends the number higher, right? And so I'm like financially incentivized. And I know people use that to different degrees in like their strategies. I think there's and there's going to be the range from 100% financialization to no financialization, and somewhere in the middle where and everybody will fall in that gradient. And I think it's just really interesting because I think now, especially with infrastructure starting to become much more commoditized, it's the play of, okay, well, what's your culture like? What's your, distribution like? That is the important part, because how do you build your community so that other communities want to interact with your community?
Yeah, and I think like what you're saying is very interesting. That fashion brand is one of the only things that people are paying you. So it's like a real proof that people really wants to do it, because there is no. It's kind of the opposite, like, of financial gain.
Right.
Uh,
It's called like potlatch is like the term that's used, right? Like, so a potlatch, and it's either a potlack or a potlatch. I don't know the exact term, how it's pronounced, but it's basically like something that I think Native American tribes used to do, or different like tribes when we were more tribal, hundreds of thousands of years ago, is like everybody would come and they would literally waste resources to show off how well they were doing, right? They're like, I am so resource rich that I will burn this hat, or I will, burn, kill some lambs, right? To show how much wealth I have. And it was like almost like this display of wealth. And that's, to a lesser extent, that's what like luxury goods are, right? It's
it's
like,
interesting.
the value of a luxury good is the fact that it has no value, right? It's like, there's no utility for it. You don't get anything special. You just wear it because it sends a signal that says something about who you are, what you do, that you can afford to pay that, right? One of the things that's like,
That's what you think. That's kind of what you did with the punk as well,
right,
initially.
that's what CryptoPunks are, right? It's like, and that was like what I wrote in my original
Post.
thesis, right? Of like, and I think I remember I was getting, if you go through the comments, like people were dunking on me, like people were all saying a bunch of shit. And there was this one guy that, because people were like, oh, well, I don't know how much money he has in the bank. Like, this doesn't really mean anything. And like the guy had the perfect responses. And this is like kind of like what I was just saying about watches and cars and houses or whatever. Is like, you don't need to know how much I have in the bank. You just need to know that I literally just spent $150,000 on a worthless picture, right? Like, that's all you need to know, right? Because that sends a signal of whatever that signal is, but like that's something that's ingrained in human culture, right? Because we've been doing this for thousands of years. There's, whether it's to display power or to show mating ability or all these different things, if we can provide or whatever, this is something that's like embedded into how we interact with other humans, and that's not going to change, right? Like our psychological programming, whether we're sitting here in the digital age or one-on-one thousands of years ago, that's still the same, and we're still going to be wired the same way.
For sure. Okay, so going back to the beginning, so you had this thing with Adidas, and then like, how this turned into your own brand? Like,
Yeah.
why not being like a punk, like, collaborating with others, and how did you get your own thing? And yeah.
So one of the things that like I guess I learned pretty quickly, and also working, Adidas was a great partner, but then also from a lot of the conversations that I was having at the time, is people would come into the space and they had their own vision of what they wanted to execute, and I could give them the best advice that I could give, and they would decide not to listen to it or to listen to it, right? And so it became like abundantly clear that if I wanted to see my vision of what I think this could be in the future, I just needed to do it on my own, right? Because me saying, hey, partner XYZ, I think you should do this, they will take that information and be like, okay, well, maybe yes, maybe no, right? And so I just felt like in order to really push the boundaries, I needed to do it on my own, as opposed to collaborating with other brands or companies or whatever.
Wow. Yeah. 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 And so how did you start it from one item? Like how do you start a fashion brand? This is a
So yeah, I mean, we basically launched, iteration one was a black t-shirt, right? We made 1,000 of them at $500 each. I don't know if you ended up getting one, but like they're like high quality, heavyweight tees.
I
We sold out.
I actually bought the NFT, but I didn't get the actual T-shirt. I think
Well,
I messed up with the physical mail or something.
Then if that's the case, you have the T-shirt sitting in a vault. We can talk about it after this. So we did that. We sold out in 2 minutes, and then we were like, okay, well, also, at the same time, I was, Snow Froze a good friend, and we were talking about a collaboration, what it might look like if you minted an NFT and we made that into a physical good right in front of you, and like it's like I think in the not too distant future, as manufacturing catches up with the human imagination, I think we're going to see a lot of, being able to walk into a store and be like, I love that, let's say, silhouette, but I want it in, this color blue, right? And, or this design. And I think you're going to go towards mass customization of one of X. And so we were like, hey, what does it look like if we were to do that, right? And so that's where we did our pop-up in Miami, where people would come in, mint an NFT. We would screen print that, direct to garment print that in front of them.
So there are blocks with the style of 90cc. How did it work?
Yeah, so basically what we did was we took the Chromie Squiggle algorithm, same exact rarities and everything, just instead of a squiggly line output, it was a straight line output, right? And it had all the rare, like you can get a pipe, you can get a bold, a hyper squiggle, and all this. And so there were different tiers in terms of you obviously didn't know what you were going to get, but you got something, right? And so that was great. We did 1,200 of them in Miami, right? And so then a couple months later, we were like, okay, well, we've done this great job with these two T-shirts. Then we're like, okay, why don't we do like a hat, right? And we did 4 different color hats with different scarcities, right? Like we did 1,600 hats, 800 black, 400 green. I don't know the exact numbers, but green, salmon, and pink. And then we did that with a treasure hunt at NFT NYC. And that went over great. Like everybody was wearing our hats.
Treasure hunt, like how did it work? Do you hide the physical hats in the conference, or?
No. So we like took over a bodega at a street corner in New York. And we said, we were like, hey, the first 1,000 people that come, we'll give you the hats. And then we had like hats hanging out at different spots. Then we did a treasure hunt where over the course of the next 3 days, I'm from New York. So I was like, I want to showcase my city a little bit. That's not necessarily, the things that you'll see on like TripAdvisor, right? It's like, oh, this is like my favorite place for pizza. This is my favorite place to hang out in the middle of the day. And we had people show up. If people showed up to 7 out of 11 of those spots, they had a chance. They were entered into a drawing to win a couple prizes. One of them being a Chromie Squiggle, right?
Wow, nice.
And so, we had thousands of people get involved, and I'll show you what the hats came in. Like when we gave out the hats, they came in this black bag, so you didn't know what color you were getting. And then you would open it, and it was kind of like an NFT reveal, right? IRL, where it's like, oh, well, I got a green hat, I got a black hat, and people were enjoying it and having a great time, right? And that was NFT NYC in 2023, and then we availed our collection in Paris in February of this year. And we did a pop-up in New York City this year where we kind of showcased the collection so people come in, try it on, start pre-ordering. And that collection arrives in September, and we're looking forward to kind of getting out there and hopefully more people having the opportunity to wear our stuff.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. So like was interesting that you basically took your principles from NFTs and implemented them on fashion, and no one did it before. Like the cross section between two worlds that no one.
Yeah, it's like seeing one trends, right? Which is why I think I was able to find and understand NFTs right before they started exploding. But then two is just kind of thinking about like human psychology and understanding that maybe like, even though it might not be readily apparent just yet, like, oh, this is where the world is going to, right? And so if that's where if that's where the world is going to, how do we like get there early and like ride that trend for as long as possible?
Wow, that's cool. And since then, like, do you think between the people that are your customers, they are also, what do you think they have in common? What do you think they have in common? Do you think there is certain things that are the values of 90cc, or these people are like, what do you think is the type of persona that?
I think they're in crypto. I think for the most part, they're in crypto. Mostly, it's funny because we have like a lot of good like international distribution. We have a lot of, I'd say about 50% of our community is in the US, 30-ish% is in Europe, and then maybe like the rest is like throughout the world, but like maybe 10 to 15% in APAC, right? And so um, I think one is like we're all like crypto enthusiasts for the most part. Um, Successful degens, right? Like running around and doing the stuff, but also like it's interesting because we have like a telegram for like the admit one members, and everybody's like spreading the gospel of crypto in general in their own unique way in their own like areas, whether geographically or vertically in an industry. So it's been really cool. Like I really enjoyed it, and having the support from the community and people as they come to our events. And then, like I said, like even it's funny because yesterday I got hit up by somebody that came to the pop-up in New York, and they were like, oh, like I have this opportunity or this interesting thing to maybe do something with you guys as a pop-up in Europe. And that he's like a community member, right? And it's just, I think there's a lot of awesome collaboration there where it's not just, oh, how do I sell more product to this group of people? It's like, yes, obviously that's part of it because you have to sell product to stay in business, but it's like, how do you create a community and a sense of people wanting to go out and be like, hey, look at what this hat can do. Scan here, like collect this digital collectible. You don't even need to call it an NFT, right? Collect this, have this digital experience with me. And people are like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? Because I think, if you want to talk about what people think of NFTs in general right now in broader cultures, they're like, oh, those were like those monkey pictures that were a scam, right? And so when you're like, no, like, look, here's collect an NFT right now, they're like, what? Like, like I sometimes I tell people, I'm like, do you want a free NFT? And they're like, okay, right? And it's like, just enter your email, right? You don't even need a wallet address, and people are like, oh, that's it, right? Like that's different. I didn't think that's what it was.
Wow, yeah, that's so cool. It's literally the only fashion brand in the world that is also like an NFT. So you I think until now you probably the only person in the world that combined these two worlds in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple others that are doing it and like getting started or whatever, but for sure, I think I was one of the earlier ones, but there's a couple people. I just think with fashion in general, like I think we're going towards a world. Fortnite and Roblox are any examples. Like digital fashion is going to be a monster category in the next few decades. I just don't think the world is quite there just yet, right? I think you need VR headsets to be a little better, AR headsets to be better, right? And that's when digital fashion really takes off. But I think part of that will be the transition of like, I don't like the term digitals, right? Where you have that digital and physical experience, and then eventually it'll be a lot of digital experiences, right? And that takes time. But does that happen in 5 years? Does it happen in 20? I think it really comes down to the hardware and the form factors coming out from major corporations of whether, how quickly this happens.
Yeah, I think actually, like one of the biggest problem that culture solves is this uh, loneliness. Like we just spoke, like walking with a friend on the beach is something that most people don't have and really need it. What are you doing in 90cc to kind of bring together the people in the community to kind of find each other? I think there is a lot there, like if they can find each other and make friends. Also in penguins, people that are having penguins are making friends with each other. So I think also Monad is so strong because it's facilitating, this poker nights and other things. So how do you find these meetups helping, people to find kind of each other and find alignment with each other?
So it's funny, like there've been like many people that love wearing our products because it allows you to wear it and meet people, right? So what I was just saying before, right? Like every product, whenever you see a 90cc logo, you can literally go up to that person and scan their product and collect an NFT, right?
Mm.
Which symbolizes that you met them real on IRL and you brought that connection on chain, right? And that's great. But I think the better part of that story is when you go and you scan somebody's hat, like you go up and talk to them, right? You're like, hey, what's up? I'm Yoni. What do you do? What you're obviously in crypto. Like, what is it that you do? And this and that. And it allows that conversation to happen. And this really stemmed from in 2021 at BTC Miami. I did like a little mini treasure hunt and I had people show up at one of the spots who didn't know each other and they became friends and ended up starting like a $20 million venture fund together
No, wow,
at
that's
me.
good.
And I was like, that's really fucking cool. Like how do we do that at scale, right? And so it's like, how do I take myself out of the equation so that if somebody meets somebody else where it's like, okay, we have something in common. Oh, okay, cool. Maybe
That's
it's
very big. You need to make it famous, like the two people was because starting a business together require a lot of trust, require a lot of like only by being like
yeah.
90 holders, like they have enough trust to understand each other. It's amazing.
And like they're about to raise their second fund, right? So it's like obviously things are going well between them, but like that to me was, I remember I saw that, and this was before like I started the brand. I'm like, I need to figure out how to like do that at scale so that it's not centered necessarily around me and it's centered around something that's bigger than myself, right? And that to me is like what I think is really cool of like, especially at crypto conferences, you see people wearing our stuff because it is like it's an easy opener, right? It's an easy thing where somebody's like, oh, hey, can I scan your product? Oh, by the way, this is what I'm working on. What are you working on? All right, cool. And, there's one community member who loves it. And he's like, I'm a really shy person. I love wearing this shirt because people come up to me and it allows me to go up to people and introduce myself and talk to them. And I was like, that's really powerful, right? Because at the end of the day, right, like all this tech that we're all using and building, it's like, technology should be making our lives better, whether it's through, financial reasons, through comfort, through ease, but then also like it's like, how do we use this for human connection? Because at the end of the day, I think that's probably one of the most important aspects of the human experience.
For sure. Wow, man, this is so cool. So, like, where 90cc holders can find each other, like, just regularly, you're regularly putting like meetups together, or
No, so like, we have a Discord, we have a Telegram where people are like, we have a weekly meetup in our Discord on Fridays where
it's cool.
I'm there every Friday for at least an hour. And sometimes like we've had like 5-6 hour combos, right? Because it's good. And like, we're not just talking crypto, we're talking about, I
Life.
mean, yeah, like some stuff we talked about is like health, conspiracy theories, life extension, like really like out there topics that aren't necessarily have to do with crypto, right? And then people form that bond, talk on the side, meet IRL around events. So it's pretty cool. It's like a very tight knit community, and like there's people in there that show up every week that like very similarly to like during COVID, where the first time I met them, like I gave them a hug because I'm like, yeah, we chat every week in the Discord, right? Like you're basically like a really close friend at this point. And so, we have those spots digitally, right? IRL, when we pop up, we're doing a pop-up in LA next weekend around VCon. So if anybody's in LA, feel free to come by. And that's where, we're going to be hosting a couple chats and whatnot. And yeah, I think the vibe has been really good, and like especially in a bear market, I think the key is like, how do you keep the vibes good and not everybody being like, oh my god, like I'm down bad on everything and this and that. And it's tough, obviously, when like everything is so financialized. And that's where I think that trying to have that effort of non-financialization really adds to it, because it's like you're here not because you want number to go up, right? You're
Mm.
here for other reasons. If number goes up, it's fine, right? Like nobody's going to say no to that, but that's not your primary purpose, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I have one more question. Then, if Nate or Moshe want to ask something, so if someone wants to create either a crypto empowered or not, like, but a new fashion brand, let's say crypto empowered fashion brand or whatever you want to take it, like, what would be your kind of advices to get things started, and what should he think about? Or let's say someone that already have a culture and then like create a fashion brand, or yeah, what would be kind of the lessons that you learned, or the advices that you'll have for someone that want to do it today?
My first piece of advice is don't do it. Uh, it's you work. I think you have the added complexity of crypto, of with also something that's like very hard and complex in and of itself, right? Digital, physical manufacturing, right, where you have to deal with, shipping and taxes and tariffs and all these things that like exist in the real world that don't exist in a digital only medium, right? Like it's funny because I think we look at people, when you do merch, right? Any project that does merch, it's like, okay, well, it needs to ship here, or we want to ship it out to members in their home, and it's like there's a lot of like complexities with that and like logistics that need to get figured out that people kind of discount, because when you mint an NFT or you buy something in crypto, it's just like press a button, transaction done, right? And it's like you need to fulfill that transaction. I would say trying to start, if I were to start one today, it's like definitely centered around culture and build that community, and then use that to kind of say, how do we turn these people that are passionate about this to become even more passionate, right? And like I still am a firm believer, and I know we're gonna see like probably fashion brands come around that like end up, let's say, like where to earn type of things. I don't think that's the right model. I don't think it lasts, because we see it with protocols, right? Where people farm the airdrop, and as soon as the airdrop happens, like they're gone, like volume disappears, right? And I just don't think that's really sustainable. It's like I think you have to figure out some happy medium between them. Like that's why I think what we did with like when we were talking about NIM and airdropping the community was really interesting, because it wasn't where to earn airdrop. It was
Just like you're a good person, we like you, we want to give you.
yeah, it was like, you're a valuable community member. Here's something you didn't expect. And then it's like surprise and delight. It's like, oh, wow, like I wore my favorite brand and I got money for it. It wasn't like every time you wear this, you get some money, right? And I think when you when you break those two up, they're very similar, but they're very distinct at the same time. I think that's when it starts to becoming really powerful, like in that nuance.
For sure, yeah, that's great. And I really like two things that I really like is like how people can trust each other enough, like because this high trust is an indication of a very strong culture. And two is the regular meetings, like the regular meetings is amazing. Moshe and Nate, do you have any question before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have a quick question which may have been answered. I'm just like lagging quite a lot. But yeah, you mentioned kind of the number go up and being able to kind of isolate that in order for people to kind of increase the vibes in the community to be tighter in a way. So it's not solely focused on number go up and where do I go to like farm my airdrops and then leave your project. So I guess you said that one way you do this is by giving valuable community members, aka those wearing the clothes, the airdrop without them expecting it. But are there any other ways of really emphasizing that human connection and community value whilst isolating the number go up aspect?
I think it's really tough to do that, right? Like I said, I think a lot of projects in crypto utilize the token as like a shortcut, right? It's like, okay, let's build around this. It's great. Like, I think when you look at like token drops, the best part, like to be, let's say, a project doing a token drop is before you do the drop, right? Because nobody knows how much the token's worth. Everybody is like, oh my God, this token is going to be worth X, right? Like that means by me interacting, I'm going to make some multiple of that.
Yeah.
And once the token is live, then everybody can back in. It's like, all right, well, every time I tap a hat, it is worth 10 cents or whatever, 50 cents. Is it worth me tapping a hat? Right. And then people make that decision. Right. And so I think it's a really hard problem to solve. I'm trying to figure it out and solve it of like, how do you, it's basically like a rewards program, right? And it's like it's a more transparent rewards program. And so it's like, how do you incentivize people while not just being like, all right, like I will just straight up pay you cash? Because in those instances, like there's no what's it called, loyalty, right? Like, well, you used to pay me $2, now you're paying me $1.50. That guy's paying me $1.70. I'm gonna go over there, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
really like valuable community members, right? Like you don't really care about necessarily keeping those, right? And I think when you look at like, I'm a firm believer of like the Pareto principle, right? This is why even with the airdrop, right, we did it to like basically the top 25% members of the community, because the Pareto principle is 80% of the value comes from 20% of the community, right? And that's in like any business, right? Like 80% of revs come from the top 20%. So you want to figure out how do you get people to want to be in that top 20% as much as possible. But if people don't fall in there, like you shouldn't be necessarily wasting a lot of your time trying to build them up. You should try to bring them down the funnel, obviously, but you want to figure out how do you incentivize and engage with like that core audience that like is what you're building your business around.
Yeah, thank you.
At least that's been like my thoughts, and I'm open to, if you think I'm wrong, like I'm definitely to chatting about it. But yeah,
I think you're right. I mean, incentivized use in a way isn't really sustainable. So like, even with like Blast, I think that's a good example. You have people exactly like you were saying, before the airdrop speculating on the value, and then they'd go and play with all the L2 dApps. And then as soon as Blast was released, 99% of those people went over to the next airdrop. But yeah, one thing I'm wondering is like, how do you like get those 80% to be part of the 20%?
I'm trying to figure that out as well, right? But like, I think part of it is like you need to build that funnel, right? To try to bring you bring somebody from not knowing about what you're doing to being interested, right? To wanting to do an action that you find valuable, right? To becoming a power user, right? And so when I think about it for us, I remember at our pop-up, there was a community member that was literally selling our stuff to people at a party where they're like, oh my God, like this jacket's great, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, do you work here? He was like, nah, I'm just like an avid fan. And I was like, how do we go, how do we create that funnel of somebody that's never heard from us to becoming that guy, right? Like, how do we create user journey to get them there? And it's tough. It's easier said than done, right? Like there's like, how do you get it so that people also don't feel like they are like grinding, right? To get to that level, because it needs to be fun, right? And that's why I always operate from the principle of I don't ask people to do anything that I don't want to do, right? If I don't want to do this, I don't want to download a new app on my phone, I'm not going to ask you to download a new app on your phone, right? So that's kind of like the first principles I operate from in terms of like, how do I try to build that journey? But it's definitely like, I don't have all the answers on there. Like, I think we're all like learning that as we go.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you very much.
I would love to dive maybe a bit deeper into the cultural traits of 9DCC. So like one example that I have in mind, which like it's kind of recent. I know that like Mike Tree was basically the creative person behind Mog, behind the idea of putting the pit wiper sunglasses and kind of like basically creating the virality effect around the meme. So like I'm wondering, like how should we think about 9DCC? Is it like a collective of highly creative people? Are there any other angles or more interesting lines that we can draw from 9DCC kind of like community members to other projects, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We have our creative vision of what we want to see, but we also have like really active like community members that are doing their own stuff, right? Because like even when we first launched, people were like, when I launched in Mint One, people were like, launch a PFP. And I'm like, I don't want to launch a PFP. I want to make clothes that will dress everybody's PFP. Because guess what? If we had our own PFP, then the only people that would buy 90cc products are people that have the 90cc PFP. And I'm like, I don't really care if you have a pudgy penguin, a bored ape, a punk, whatever. I want you to wear my product. I don't want you to be like, oh, I only fuck with this. I only wear that. And so I think Mike is a great example of like, I think Mike is hella fucking creative. I always laugh at his posts. I think he's like a S tier troller. Like he literally knows how to press people's buttons. He's really good at it and a really nice guy, right? And so, you know, it's really cool when like I see him on the timeline and he's doing some really cool shit. And, you know, he has the 90cc affiliate badge, which, you know, you get from being like a certain level, like in our rankings or higher, right? And like we affiliate those people because it's like, yeah, you want to be affiliated with the brands you love and care about. And so, you know, we do collabs, right? And we're always like in constant conversations with artists. And, you know, he's like one of the artists that, you know, we're trying to figure out how to do something really cool together. But it's just kind of like, it's like people that I fuck with, right? That like, I'm like, I think this person's really cool. I think they're really talented. Even if, you know, I think even, I don't know how many followers he has now, but, you know, when I started talking to him, I think he had like 12,000 followers, 15,000 followers. And I was like, this guy is going to be big. I can tell, you know, even like somebody like Jack Butcher, right? Like I was like talking to Jack Butcher before checks, right? Here at an exhibit at Art Basel a couple of years ago. And Jack was one of the artists that I put in there. And then like 3-4 months later is when checks happened. And that's when he had his like real blow up, right? So yeah, I mean, I just think it's more of like the community, getting people that are, everybody's doing their own thing in the world. And it's just like, here's one way to kind of represent that in the world. And it's not necessarily your identity, right? But it's a facet of the things that you're interested in.
Amazing. Okay, G, was amazing. Thank you for coming, and was amazing conversation. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Bye-bye.
Later. Bye.